afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Liz Reese, Digital Marketing Specialist at Alertus Technologies. During this presentation, Amanda Sassano, Director of Commercial Sales, will share insight on net-centric alerting and how Alertus can help your organization quickly and affordably implement a comprehensive emergency notification system. Feel free to submit your questions during the webinar at any time, and they will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any questions after this presentation, please email marketing@alertus.com. Now I'd like to turn it over to Amanda.
Thanks, Liz, and welcome everyone. I'm going to go over a brief agenda to start. Sorry for the brief technical difficulties, but we'll definitely keep this within the time frame that you've allowed in your calendars. So today's agenda, we're going to start with the mass notification challenges that most of our customers and even just the industry is seeing as a whole. Go over the different types of notification when it comes to mass notification, what solutions are out there, and ultimately how to utilize your existing infrastructure to capitalize on the net-centric environment that you already have deployed or your customers have deployed. Talk about the solution, and then any questions and answers that you may need, or like Liz said, feel free to add them in the chat and we'll address those as we go or at the end. And also, if we have time, since we did get started a little late, we may have time to do a live activation to highlight some of those endpoints. But if we don't get to that, we'll definitely follow up with a video that demonstrates those net-centric assets being activated in the event of a potential emergency. So the big question around mass notification is really what constitutes a mass notification system or mass notification in general. And the actual definition really outlines a system or systems that help protect life by indicating the existence of an emergency situation and communicating information necessary to facilitate an appropriate response. So those types of situations can be from active shooter to weather type emergencies, even strategic communication throughout an organization. But ultimately, you know, it's a instance that you have a situation that occurs that you need to get that message out as quickly as you can and to as many people as you can in that event. And then the challenges that we typically see, there's a few highlighted up here, and these challenges are consistent throughout any vertical that we support. So from education to corporate, manufacturing, state and local government, any industry that has assets and people, maybe guests throughout their facility that they need to protect, as well as employees, students, fall into having some of these challenges. So locations that have no way of notifying, maybe buildings aren't staffed 24/7. If you have maintenance, then they're working, or maybe it's a area that people spend their afternoons or evenings. Special needs individuals, loud environments, that may be a challenge in figuring out what are the different types of notification or different ways of notifying in a loud environment. Cell phones not being allowed, we'll highlight that personal recipient notification when it comes to mass notification as a tool. But the key with all of this is not one solution is the end-all be-all. It really is that combination and layering approach. And then difficulty reaching visitors and contractors. So you may be accounting for your employees, your students, but what about guests? What about people that you don't have in a database somewhere? And then the challenge with mass notification in general is that there's a lot of gray areas. So when it comes to codes and mandates, there are a few industries that have some guidelines or some requirements, such as the Clery Act and the UFC, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And also NFPA is continuing to address this question and further define what is required when it comes to mass notification. The other challenge is a lot of organizations do have some assets in place, but nothing's unified. So they may have text and email, they may have sound and paging, they may have a fire emergency system, they may have access control, cameras, but it's taking a really long time to coordinate an activation, because with all these assets, how are you leveraging them in the correct capacity and ultimately leveraging them to prevent loss of life in the event of an emergency. And what we typically find is that some organizations, it can take up to 30 minutes to coordinate an activation, a true activation in the event of an emergency. And if we look at, past statistics, typically any active shooter or natural disaster type incident is over within the first 5 minutes. So if you think about it and you're trying to coordinate with other staff or maybe administrators or other locations, trying to round up maybe employees, and if you do have guests on the property, how are you going to be able to coordinate an activation in the time that prevents loss of life? So we really do have to focus on what assets are existing and how we can unify those to really speed up that process and ultimately prevent loss of life. So when we talk about net-centric alerting, that term, if you've attended our webinars in the past, we do one that focuses on facilities and existing infrastructure. This goes hand in hand with that net-centric alerting, because the definition is really participating as a part of a continuously evolving complex community of people, devices, information, and services interconnected by the communications network to achieve optimal benefit of resources and better synchronization of events and their consequences. So what this really means is, if you have a system or assets that are already connected through your organization, so things like Active Directory, things like desktop computers or laptops or voice phones, anything that sits in your environment is a net-centric asset that we can leverage as an emergency alerting tool. So along with other types of existing infrastructure that you may have, it really is important that everything is interconnected and reliable if anything were to occur. And having that reliability with having it in your environment, under your control, is something that really keeps it under your control. It keeps it as a simple approach. It gives you additional assets that you can leverage in another capacity, and ultimately makes things more affordable. So you can leverage that existing infrastructure as well as any IT or net-centric asset that you may have. So here we'll talk about the different types of mass notification or categories of mass notification. The in-building facility approach and the distributed recipient are two that typically are having assets in your environment, on your network. The wide area, if you do have that existing infrastructure, we obviously can support that as well. But the distributed recipient and the in-building facility are the two that you're going to have those existing net-centric assets that we can leverage in an alerting capacity. And we'll highlight those, kind of talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each, or things to consider. So when we look at the facility approach or the in-building notification, there are many advantages. Alerting areas of space. So instead of relying on reaching that individual's device, we really are focusing on anyone in and around that space, whether that's indoor or outdoor. But it's not limited to just those individuals that you have their contact information. So with that, covering dead zones, alerting special needs individuals, so having that visual and audible notification in and around the facility. Loud environments, you can supplement that coverage with a visual alerting component. And then some companies or areas within organizations, if they're only relying on personal recipient solutions or text and email providers, cell phones, ultimately, They may have dead zones, or cell phones may not be allowed. I know when I was a student in college, the first thing professor said was turn off your phone. So if that's the only way that maybe a university or any organization is relying on reaching its employees or even students in the event of an emergency, it's not 100% reliable. So having that facility approach paired with the personal recipient really does ensure that everyone is notified. Reaching visitors and contractors, this can be accomplished with a facility type approach because, like I said, it's not reliant on someone being on or within their database. And then also it's really the most cost-effective solution. So you're able to leverage existing infrastructure, fill in those gaps as needed, but if you have things within your network as well as more physical security assets, you're able to leverage those. So it's not a rip and replace as some other technologies can be. But things to consider whenever it comes to facility-based approaches is that it really does only cover the people in and around the facility. So where the advantage on a text and email or personal recipient, if you're an organization and you have people scattered throughout different locations or maybe even the world, you can communicate with groups of people versus endpoints. So that's really where having that balance of both comes into effect and really gives you the most comprehensive solution that you can have. And then also, it is dependent on your local network and power. So the devices do typically have power or battery backup, and we can support redundancy as far as the network is concerned. But these are just things to highlight just so that you're made aware that they are or could be vulnerabilities that do exist. So with the in-building approach or the facilities approach, down on the bottom are just a couple things that we're able to leverage, and these are all assets that can be on the network, from desktop computers, digital signs, VoIP phones, the cable TV may be operating as more of a digital sign, but other things that we can leverage like PA systems, fire alarm control panels, as well as indoor and outdoor speakers can also be integrated into that solution so that everyone is notified through as many channels as possible. On the personal side, I kind of already mentioned some of these, but with the advantages, targeting those individuals or a group of people, no matter where they are, if they're on campus, off campus, around the world in different facilities, you're still able to reach them through a personal recipient solution. The timeliness of the messages, typically, that they can be delivered, very quickly. Also, you don't need to be in a specific location. And then it's also a hosted solution in most cases. So where in a net-centric environment, those assets are within your control, they're on your network. A hosted solution does give organizations an ease of deployment in most cases. Limitations, it's typically opt-in only. If you have people that are coming and going, it's difficult to manage those contact lists and make sure they're updated. It's also dependent on a cell network. So if you don't have cell service, you aren't going to receive that alert. And also there's a very small percentage of being able to confirm that the messages that you are sending were actually received. So this is a way that you may be utilizing this, but is it 100%? And that's where having that balance really comes into play as being the best way to ensure that everyone is notified. The other piece to this, and what I refer to as the layered approach, is really having, on the facility side, that audible and visual notification. This really comes into play with special needs individuals, also loud environments. If there's an area that maybe you have a PA system or existing fire system that's voice enabled, but you have no visual notification. So this is where that layered approach comes into play. And ultimately, with a mass notification solution, especially a fully integrated solution, education and engagement is really, really invaluable. So having that emergency preparedness plan in place, making sure that everyone that is an employee at least is educated on the fact that it's there, and the fact that if something were to occur, what that next step looks like. Also, if there are organizations that anytime a guest enters the facility, there's a screening process, and they are educated on the assets that, or the policies and procedures that are put in place to ensure their safety while they are on premise. So this doesn't only apply to people within your organization, it does apply to those people that are coming to your campus or organization, and making sure that they also are aware of the steps that they need to take if anything were to occur while they're on premise. So what does the Alertus solution bring to the table, and kind of what sets us apart is these 3 bullet points that we really focus on with any type of customer that we're supporting. So creating that single point of activation. Like I said, if you have those assets but it takes you 10, 20, 30 minutes to coordinate that, the incident's already over. So being able to create that single point, cut down on that response time, and activate all of those endpoints within seconds is extremely invaluable. Integrating with all notification assets, so whether they're net-centric or more physical security, being able to tie everything together so that if you want, when you push a button for doors to lock and signs to be taken over, the PA system to kick on, they can do that within seconds. And then ultimately filling in the gaps. So if you have areas that you have those net-centric environments that you can, or assets that you can leverage, but you still have areas that there are gaps that you want to fill, that's where we want to focus on, because the first thing is really leveraging that infrastructure and then taking that step in filling in those gaps. So with a net-centric environment, what does this give you the ability to do? And it really is an immediate way to leverage those assets. So things from digital signage to VoIP phones to desktop notification, mobile apps, anything that is tied to your environment, we can take over within seconds, kind of act as that easy button to activate all of those assets with that unified message. So no matter where I am within the facility, I'm able to, if I'm being recognized as an IT asset and an IP endpoint, I'll be taken over with that emergency message. So think about, even in your environment or maybe your customer's environment, how many endpoints they have currently that you can leverage within seconds and go back to them or evaluate your plan as it is currently and see how much additional coverage can be achieved just by leveraging that technology that you've already spent time, money, and resources to implement. So this is really where Alertus can tie all of those together and create that net-centric activation. So from the net-centric assets, which are more in the top list, from mobile phones to tablets, computers, digital signage, cable TVs, also VoIP phones. There's a lot of that visual alerting, as well as with the VoIP phones, we can take over the speakers, so there's visual and audible alerts. But then as far as other existing infrastructure that you can tie with those net-centric assets, from fire panel speakers to indoor and outdoor, voice-enabled assets, we can take over all of those with that emergency message within seconds. So it's not just limited to the devices that are on your network. We would be able to connect those gaps with some hardware that we have that's simple to put in place. And those devices actually sit on your network as well. So where maybe a fire panel or an intercom isn't currently on your network, we can create that or make that connection to turn that into a net-centric asset through the connections with our hardware. And then there are many ways of activating the system, especially within your environment. So, number one is the web interface. That's typically, the user interface. You can operate out of that, but most of the customers that we support activate through panic buttons or panic alerts. And those we have in a variety of ways. So one being the mobile app. So this is a way that you can quickly, if you have administrator or user rights to the system, activate the system within seconds. Same way with our software panic buttons. You can turn any PC or laptop into an activation point as well as leveraging it as that alerting endpoint. And then we do have additional buttons that are an extension that plug directly into a PC or laptop with our USB button. So just a shortcut, instead of them clicking on an icon, they can actually have a physical button that they push. But that ties right into that PC or laptop, that ties right into your network, and that can activate by location, by group of devices, and have the behavior that you want it to have in the event of that particular emergency. So now I'm going to highlight the endpoints that really do fall under that net-centric environment currently. And the first being desktop notification. This is probably our most versatile product and definitely the product that no matter what customer vertical we are supporting, they are leveraging this in some capacity, whether they have 10 desktops that they want to leverage all the way up to hundreds of thousands of endpoints across a global entity that they want to be able to leverage with the alerting capabilities. So whether it's a full screen activation or more tailored pop-ups or ticker mode alerts, they're able to leverage this in an alerting capacity as well as more of a strategic communications tool within their organization. So this does tie in with Active Directory, another asset that you have, and you can target based off of IP subnets, based off of location, based off of groups of devices, an Active Directory group. So there's a lot of flexibility with this product. And think about how many entities, or even you yourself, that you have these laptops and desktops that you can very quickly leverage as an alerting endpoint in the event of an emergency. This just highlights further the customization of the desktop notification. So also within the enhanced desktop, this is where the software panic button resides. So if it's a icon on the screen or a press for help button, ties, like I said, directly into your network. It can send an alert to a group of individuals or an area or a department, but customizing it from anything from look and feel to behavior, it really is an extremely agile product that you can have it behave within your organization how you see fit. This highlights the desktop panic. So this is, like I said, an enhanced alerting endpoint or enhanced feature through the desktop notification. And we have, you can see up on the screen, not only the press for help button, but also you can tailor icons that are tied to a certain behavior. So these are obviously preset, and with any type of panic button or alert that you are uploading on anyone's or want an activation point to be, you want to make sure that that individual or that department, that building is educated on what it's there for, and even testing the systems so that they know if I press this, this is going to be the behavior that happens, and I'm alerting this area or these individuals that I need immediate support. This is just a closer look at the USB panic button. Like I mentioned, this is an extension of the software panic button, so operates just like if you were to click those icons on the screen, and it has a behavior associated with that button. So if it's a lockdown, if it's a press for help and gives your location, really whatever you want this to look and feel like, it's just so someone has a more discreet, these are typically utilized for public-facing employees or areas within the facility. But you could you could, anyone could really leverage these if you wanted to utilize a button versus just creating an icon. The mobile app, so we have two different mobile apps. One, the activation app, like I mentioned. You can quickly, you aren't tied to being by a physical button or being at your desktop. If you're an administrator, you can activate the system remotely. Also, we do have a recipient app. So if you have, your employees or any guests within the facility, you can have them download this app and they can receive alerts if something were to occur while they're on premise. And this is not limited to having cell service. This is able to operate in a, if they have any type of network connectivity through the Wi-Fi. So it is a way to ensure that if maybe they don't have cell service, but they do have, they are connected to the network, then they are able to, they're still able to receive that alert. VoIP phone. So this is obviously a net-centric device. We can take over the screen and the speaker, and ultimately leveraging that existing infrastructure to make sure that any asset that your customers or yourself have on your network is able to be taken over within seconds in the event of an emergency. This also can be used for more so strategic communication, targeting groups, targeting, different, how the call managers are broken out by location or by department. So there's a lot of flexibility with this as well. And we have developed a way to have this be an activation point. So this is another one that has dual functionality where it is an alerting endpoint, but it also has the ability to trigger a behavior in the event of a particular emergency. So now that we'll shift to more of the, we'll talk about the alert beacon a little bit. So the alert beacon is unique to Alertus. It is a network appliance. So even if you do have these around your facility currently or are looking at them, this is really where we're able to tie that existing infrastructure into your network because they connect and communicate directly through the alert beacon. And the alert beacon sits in your environment. So it is an ADA compliant alerting endpoint, has visual and audible notifications. So these are placed in and around facilities if they have areas that maybe they need additional coverage, any gaps that we need to fill, also being able to integrate and really unify your existing infrastructure and net-centric assets. This really is key in getting that well-rounded solution and ultimately get that alert out within seconds if something were to occur. So this is really what started Alertus. This is the first product that was developed, and we're very proud of the way that it is preventing loss of life with our current customer base, and definitely has a lot of opportunities to fill in those gaps and ultimately unify your solution. So like I mentioned, the alert beacon sits on your network and can bridge that gap between existing infrastructure that's maybe not on your network to really being able to monitor that and get it on your network. So from monitoring specifically to the fire panel, we can send location-specific information or behavior-specific information, the incident that may have occurred within the panel. The alert beacon can take in that information, encrypt that. The module encrypts that, feeds that into the alert beacon, which then can communicate out to any additional assets. So sending that back to the server can then send that to the desktop computers, VoIP phones, digital signs, whatever assets you want that message to appear on, it can do so. It can also give the location-specific information. So for first responders or anyone that is responding to that incident, they will know where it was pulled or where maybe a sprinkler went off, that detailed information that typically they would have to go to the panel to discover or uncover. So being able to get that message out in that granular detail around what actually occurred and what are the next steps is really where that connection into the alert beacon and ultimately your environment comes into play. The other way that the alert beacon ties in existing infrastructure is with our text-to-speech module, which we are able to feed into any PA system, any voice-enabled fire panel, any outdoor notification. So this is another way that we can tie in that existing infrastructure that currently isn't connected into the network through the alert beacon and streamline that process by leveraging that as an alerting endpoint if there was an emergency that you wanted to leverage your PA system or automate that voice with our text-to-speech module. Digital signage and cable TV, these may be assets that are on your network. They may not be, but we can leverage them with software similar to the desktop. So typically, if we are leveraging them in that capacity, they are a network appliance. This is an area where you can get that additional visual alerting piece without having to retrofit an area, or maybe you can, you don't have to put an alert beacon in that area because you have that visual component. But ultimately, it's just another layer in that approach when it comes to visual alerting in the event of an emergency. The other way that we can tie in is through contact closure. So anything like access control or camera systems, maybe a shooter detection or shot detection system. This is a way that contact closure actually feeds directly into the alert beacon. So it's another way that a non-network appliance, we can connect that bridge and get it integrated with your network and make sure that all assets are being leveraged and in a timely manner. To kind of overview quickly about the net-centric alerting, these are the really big the positives about being able to leverage that. So we're leveraging those existing IP investments, those things that you spent time, money, resources implementing. It's not a rip and replace type of technology. Creating that single point of activation ultimately cuts down on that response time and make sure that everyone is notified within seconds. Provides that complete notification coverage. So being able to tackle that balance of visual and audible, as well as indoor, outdoor, and personal. So that's kind of highlighted below. Integrating with all notification assets, so being able to take those non-network appliances and bridge that gap with our technology to create or include them all in that net-centric or mass notification solution. Cost-effective options. So not having to retrofit your facility definitely saves a lot of those funds, and capital expenditures can be used elsewhere. Open interoperability and able to expand with new facilities. Maybe you have a new building or a new location that's going up even across the world. Anything that's within your environment, we can still communicate and bridge that gap with the net-centric environment or net-centric assets as well as existing infrastructure. And then ultimately we're filling in the gaps and bridging those gaps with the technology to create that one-touch solution that is able to be notified or push the notification out within seconds. So at this time I'll turn it back over to Liz and we'll be able to address any of your questions. It looks like there are a couple that have come in. So
given we do have a little bit of time left, we are beginning our Q&A session of our presentation. If you have a question, please feel free to submit them through the chat or question box. Please note, if we do not get to your question, which in this scenario today, unfortunately, we will, we greatly apologize. A representative will reach out to you to answer your question directly. A recording of this webinar will also be shared with you after today's presentation. So let's begin with our first question. First question is around a database architecture diagram. So we do have some assets that are that we can forward along, and we can within the follow-up. But also when it comes to a database, we don't store. This can be taken two ways, I guess. A database, to me, if I'm just interpreting it face value,
is more of a contact database, and we don't store contact information. We are alerting that endpoint. We do have an API integration with any text and email provider. So, solutions like Everbridge, Raise, SendWord Blackboard, that they more store the database, but we can definitely provide an architecture diagram of how our endpoints and environment operate and what that may look like. The second question, do we support third-party digital menu boards? We can. We have a few integrations that we've built out with existing companies, but really any Windows-based signage we can leverage as an alerting endpoint. But we'll definitely follow up, and if there's a way, I've been with Alertus for about 3 years, and there really hasn't been anything that we haven't been able to figure out a way to integrate with, whether that's through our API or RSS feeds. So we can look at that. But any rule of thumb is any Windows-based digital signage we are able to integrate with. The next question, I'm guessing this may be from an existing customer, but any certificate issues, I'm guessing that's on the desktop side. That would go over to our support team. So with any Alertus deployment, you have an implementation person to help you get everything moving, and then other things outside of that roll over into support. So we'll definitely follow up and make sure you have the appropriate contact. The next question is, how intrusive is the software? Will it block the computer/smartphone when the alert comes in? So the answer to that is most commonly it does not inhibit the functionality of the device. We do have some customers that require us to lock the screen, so we can lock down the screen, but typically it's not. It's, you can acknowledge it, it goes away, but if it's a quarter screen or ticker mode, it does not inhibit the functionality of that device. Is Alertus supported, looks like a specific IP phone. So the main ways that we integrate with VoIP is we have a deeper level integration with Cisco, as well as Avaya, where we're wrapping that up. And then we do have a SIP enunciating version. So any type of device that you may have that you want to leverage, we'll definitely connect with you on that and get one of the account managers to reach out, find out some questions that we need answered, and figure out how we would interface with that. So my guess, just blanket guess, would be with our SIP enunciator, but we do have those deeper level integrations with Cisco and Avaya.
And on that note, just want to add a second note to that. We are having a webinar next Wednesday that is specifically focusing on VoIP and SIP, phone notification solutions. So if you're interested to learn a little bit more of that in detail, please join us next Wednesday.
Thanks, Liz. And the last question is, how many people can you reach at the same time on their desktop phone, and computer? So our activation is within seconds. So if you're doing an activation to all endpoints, they'll receive it in seconds. If you're doing an activation to a specific group of devices, those devices will receive that within seconds. So the asset does have to be turned on. It's something that we aren't able to turn on a device. But if there is an active alert and I sit down, turn on my computer, log in, then I will receive that alert if it is still active. What is the audibility range of the Alertus beacon? So the alert beacon, it just has a tone that goes up to 106 to 110 decibels. So it gets very, very, very loud, but it just has a tone. It doesn't have text-to-speech. Where the text-to-speech comes into play is interfacing that with a PA or fire panel that's voice-enabled. But the audibility range is, a couple hundred feed for an alert beacon at the max volume.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Amanda, for the insight. We have concluded our Q&A session of this presentation, and we're able to go a little bit over time, considering that we did start later today. But if you have any additional questions or need additional information, please feel free to email marketing@alertus.com, and we'll be happy to assist. If we didn't get to your question today, as mentioned earlier, we will have a representative directly reach out to you with further information. And if you're looking for more information about Alertus in general and our solutions, please visit our website at alertus.com. And if you're interested in upcoming webinars, you can visit the webinar page at alertus.com/webinars. So thank you again for joining today's webinar, and thank you for your patience, and we look forward to meeting you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.